Hi everybody, this is session one. We were supposed to record the Zoom meeting, but some idiot forgot to press the button. Yeah, that would be me. So I'm going to record it separately, but hopefully I'll hit all the points that we covered in the Zoom session. So, as you can see, this is the application itself, Affinity Photo version 2. First thing I'm going to do is just load a file. Now you can either do up here in the top, file, open, and when you press that you'll just get your normal file explorer and navigate and find the CR3 file or photo file that you want. Alternatively, you can just drag and drop. So that's the way I tend to work. I'll have all the photos out from a particular shoot. I'll run through them and pick the ones I want to edit and just simply drag it into the application. Now the interesting thing here is that you actually start in what we call the develop persona. A little bit like Lightroom in that this is where you just do some very basic tweaks before taking it into the main photo editing. I don't generally spend an awful lot of time in this particular section, purely just try and balance out the histogram, where needed, adjust the exposure, maybe pull up some shadows and highlights. But basically this is how this works in this area. You've got the basic settings, you've got your histogram up here, so, and you simply slide the options to make it darker or lighter, and you can see the histogram immediately changing. Now what you can see here is that it's showing where you're clipping the highlights in this particular case, and that's covered by this button here. So basically we've brightened it up so much that there's no information, it's just pure white. So we don't want that, so we need to pull that back down. Whenever you're moving that slider around, if you want to reset it, you can just click twice on the button and it will zero out. If you make several adjustments all over the place and this entire section you just want to reset it, you can by just pressing this little button here. And what you saw there, if I change the black point, this is similar to the clipping highlights. This is anything in blue is basically pure black. So you want to try and avoid that, unless the actual area should be pure black, in which case that's fine. You can turn the clipping option on and off, as you can see by clicking this button up here. I'll just reset that. As I said, I don't spend too much time in here because nearly everything you can do here you can do in the main photo area. But out of interest, you've got the exposure area, you've got the enhanced area, so for instance the contrast, so you can, let me turn the clipping off so that you can see the photo. You can increase the contrast or lighten the contrast, you can increase the clarity, decrease the clarity, etc, etc, the saturation and vibrance. You can change the white balance, so you can make items more blue, warmer or colder. and you can change the tint as well. And again, you can simply click the buttons here to just reset everything. Another area that you might be interested in is you've got lens distortions you can work on. You've got defringing, etc. But I'm not going to go into too much detail at this stage. One area you might be interested in, and I would recommend doing noise reduction as one of the very first things you do. Get that out the way. So if we look at this photo here, I picked this one in particular because it was quite noisy. So you can, under the detail, you can go to the noise reduction, tick that, and if you increase the luminance, you can see the background smoothing out. And if we just move that slider further, the further you go, the smoother the background will become. But there is a downside. Now if we look at the top bar here, you've got this nice little icon set here, and if I click on the middle one, it will give me a split view. And if I zoom in, say on this eye, you can see the noise on the right hand side, which is before, and you can see the effect on the left hand side. Now if I drop that all the way back down again, you can see all the noise, and as I increase it, the noise does reduce, but you'll also notice that the sharpness also reduces. That's the downside of running a noise reduction program. So really you want to do is reduce the noise to a point where you think it's acceptable without too much fuzziness on the actual subject. As you can see here, you can see he's got a beard here, but if I move it over, you're starting to lose that detail. So really you've got to make your own decision on how much noise reduction to actually apply. Once you've finished playing around with the general settings, and I'll go back to a normal view, we can hit the develop button. Now this will take us into the main program. Now if you were loading a JPEG, you'd come straight into this. It's only raw files that you get taken into the develop persona first. So we're now in the photo persona. Persona's just really, it's really all it is just a means of loading the correct interface to do the job at hand. So this is where you'll spend 95% of your time making adjustments. Now let's have a quick look at the interface. Along the top you've got your general toolbar here, so you've got your file options, edit, etc. I'm not going to go into every one, this is just an introduction, but you've got your basic filters up here, but we probably won't use those. We'll use another section of the interface for that. Moving down, you have your general icons. So these are your personas. So we were in this one here, the develop persona, and we're now back in the main photo persona. So if we wanted to go back to develop, we just purely press that button. You'll see the interface change, and we're back on this page. And when if we wanted to go and do another little adjustment, and then to finish that, you either hit develop or you hit cancel. Either way, you end up back in the photo persona. Along here, you've got some basic tools. You've got some selection tools. You've got some input things like snapping and moving by pixels. This is just for better picking, basically. You'll set these once and probably never set them again. If we come down, we have the photo information, So you've got some very basic information there. So the photo size, how many megabytes, colour space, etc. You've got the title and you've got the photo. Down the left hand side are your main tools. Today we'll probably just focus on 2 or 3 of these items, and I'll cover them as we go through. On the right hand side we have our main panels, and this is where you'll spend most of your time picking new commands, checking what the information is, etc. So we've got our photo. Normally you probably start on the histogram page just to have a look and see what it's like. Below that, the layers tab is probably the most important one that you'll be on. It should be there as default when you start the program fresh. And finally, down the bottom you have things like your history, libraries, navigator, which I don't tend to use very often. It's mainly left on history, so you can quickly undo, redo to certain points in the if you're unhappy with what you've done. So on the layers, you'll always have your base layer, which is the actual photo itself, and we're going to be building changes on top of this photo, and we will be using layers to do this. Now, the best way of thinking of a layer is your photo's on a table. You're going to take a piece of glass, you're going to put it up upon that photo, and you're going to apply something to that piece of glass. You're going to make the glass darker, you're going to make the glass shine and make the photo lighter. You might do all sorts of things with that layer on top of the photo. So you're not modifying the photo itself, you'll have a layer on top of it and you're manipulating what the photo looks like, and that manipulation, that layer, can be turned on or off, and it can be modified and re-edited very easily. So before we go any further, a couple of things we could do to start with. I think the first thing is we'll show the crop tool. You don't have to crop to start with. Some people prefer to leave cropping to the end. Some people like to crop to begin with, to set the scene. We'll use it to begin with. So if we look on the left hand tool, you can see here that we've got a crop tool that immediately puts up this grid which you can move around and position. So you can either pick it up by the corners or the sides, and you can see it's maintaining a ratio here at the moment, so you can just move that around to suit. Now how we control that is up the top here. So you've got a little presets here, which is this little icon, and if we come down you'll see that it's got all the common ratios, so you can pick any of these ratios. So what we're going to do is I've got my own ratio here. We'll show you in another session how you can create your own. I'll pick landscape, A4. Now that's not actually the direction I want this to be in. I do want it to be a portrait. So again, if we come to this bar and move across, you've got an option here called rotate. So if we just click on that, we can rotate between portrait and landscape. So we'll leave it at rotate, and we can pick up the handles and just move it to the size we want and position it. Now let's have another little look here. We've got mode, and at the moment we've got a custom ratio. So we picked it, started at the ratio is A4 at the moment. We can do unconstrained, which basically means that we can just pick any corner and it changes completely. So if you just want to manually change the shape, you can do. That works quite well in a PDI, but usually for a print you normally want a predefined ratio. You've got the size of the area that you're going to be left with, so it gives you an idea of how much you're cropping, how many pixels. So you can go right down and you can see the numbers just getting smaller and smaller. But we'll go back to an A4 and rotate it, and I'll just position that, roughly speaking. Now if we look at that, one of the main things you want to do when cropping is actually straighten the image. Now that might be for a horizon, it might be to make a building upright, and what you can do, the way you do that is you use the straighten tool up here. So basically click on the straighten tool and you get a cursor, and let's say we want these two elbows to be in a complete straight line. So what we do is we pick the bottom of the first elbow and then move the cursor to the bottom of the second elbow, and as soon as I release, the image will flip around, and now that is a straight line between the two elbows, and you can see the whole photo has been shifted round. Another way you might want to consider that, let me just undo that. Now I can undo by Control Z, or if I look at my history, we've just run straighten, and if I just move to the previous option, it will put the picture back to where it was. What I might want is that the position between the tip of his nose to the middle of his tie is vertical. So you might, this is the sort of thing you might do with a building. So if I pick the middle of his nose and come down to the middle of his tie, if I release, it will straighten. So what it's looking at is those 2 points, and it will snap to whether it's the nearest point to either horizontal or vertical, depending on where you are. So I think that's quite a nice way of straightening him up in the actual image. I'll just move this over a bit, give him a little bit more room there, and when I'm happy I can either hit the enter key or I can hit the apply button up here. So we'll just hit apply, and there we go. So he's been trimmed and straightened. Now what we're going to do is look at some basic manipulation of the image. So again, if we come to this area over here, within the layer area you've got some icons down the bottom here, and the main two we'll be focused on today is this one here, which is adjustments, which looks like a contrast type image, and this little hourglass, which is live filters. So the first thing we're going to do is darken this image down, because basically I want the background to be darker, and then we'll see how we can make the background darker but make the subject not as dark. So we don't want to darken the actual image, the person himself, that dark. So what we're going to do is, it's currently on the we've only got one layer, we've got the original image. So if we come to this icon, press it, you'll get a menu. So the first thing I'm going to do is a levels adjustment. So if I just click on that, just move that over, there we go. Now if you look at the layer panel, it's now added an option called levels adjustment with that icon on top of the image. So this is like our first sheet of glass going on top of the photo. And we're going to manipulate this sheet of glass by adjusting the levels within the photo. And it's not an ideal image, this one, because if you look at the histogram, it's fairly wide. It's got a lot of darks, which is on the left. So basically, the more left you go, the darker it is. So we've got blacks in that area. And on the right, you're going up to the whites. And it goes fairly close to the full spectrum available to us. But this will give you an idea. So if we look at this image, what we can do is take the black level, and if we move it, you can see the background and him all going darker and darker and darker and darker as we move it along. So I'm quite happy to bring that down. We're just going to take it a little bit further, and then on the whites we're going to move that in, and you can see it getting lighter and lighter and lighter. Okay, now what you can do, if you hold the Alt key down before you move the slider, if I move it, you see it immediately goes white, and we can move it in, and it's showing you what will be clipped. So if I take my finger back off, you see these white, the white parts of his shirt. So as I move that up, when I get to that point there, what that means is those parts of his shirt are pure white now. They have no real information apart from white. We probably don't want to actually go that far. So again, what I'll do is I'll take that back, hold the key down, and I can bring it in, and that's just to the edge. But we're so close anyway, it probably doesn't make an awful lot of difference. But on the black side, we have made this area pretty much black. It's pure black, but I don't mind that. That's fine. Once you've done that adjustment, the only thing you need to do is dismiss the menu. Don't press OK or cancel. You can hit delete, which will remove this. You can hit reset, which will reset all the sliders. But if you're happy with what you've got, you just hit the X and the dialog goes away. If I want to make a modification to that, I just come up to this one here and I double click it, and the dialog comes back up, and it's got your current settings in the dialog, and you can continue to adjust it if you want. So it's very nice because you've made the adjustment, you've looked at it, and you think, oh, hang on, no, that's probably a little bit too dark. So I'll bring that back up again. And when I'm happy, I just hit the X. So I can go and change that at any time. So it gets a default name, but if you actually click on that name itself, you can rename it to something more suitable. So darken background is what we're trying to do. So you could name it to what you're trying to attempt to do. Now what I'll do is I'll do another one, but using a different method. And this time we'll use the brightness and contrast filter. So again, you've now got different controls to do with brightness and contrast. So that we've now got the photo, and then we've got a piece of glass which is darkening the background by using the levels. We're now putting another piece of glass on top, and we're now going to adjust the brightness and contrast of the image. So at no point are we actually modifying the image itself, the original image. So this is fairly straightforward. You can reduce the brightness, you can increase the brightness. If you double click the actual pull item, it will zero it. And contrast, you can adjust the less contrast, more crunchy. So you can do that type of change. So I'm going to reduce the brightness down, and I'm going to increase the contrast slightly, and that's just made the whole image darker. So I'm happy with that. So, but what I'm doing the effect to try and reduce the background mainly, but I'd like him brightened up a little bit, back to where he was, or maybe slightly darker. But we can make those adjustments. So how do we do this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to paint on the on this particular adjustment layer, and we're going to use a paintbrush. So over on the left we have a paintbrush which we can click on. There is a shortcut, you can just press B. So if I pick a different item, you can see it's got a slightly darker background, and if I press the B key, it will jump to the brush. So it's a very quick way. There, you know, I wouldn't expect you to learn all the shortcuts, but there's probably half a dozen shortcuts that, if you know them, just saves you moving the mouse around the interface all the time. So we're picking a brush. We can see the circle which represents the brush, and we can make the brush bigger or smaller using the square bracket keys. Now if I just quickly pull up this dialog here, these are the two keys I mean. So basically that makes the brush smaller, that makes the brush bigger. So if I come over onto his face, I can make the brush bigger. I'm pressing the right key and make it smaller. Now the other thing I need to do is go to the colour panel up here. So next to the histogram you've got colour, and basically this is what your paintbrush is doing. It's currently selected black. You can see the black is over the top of the white. If I pick the white icon, it's now over the top of the black, so now I'm painting with white. And I can just click and change. If I want to change without having to keep going to this panel, I can hit the X key, which is basically exchange. So if I press X, you'll see it flip over, press it back. So black brush, white brush, black brush, white brush. And you'll see the significance of this shortly. So we've made this adjustment called brightness onto the background. I've got a black brush, and if I move my cursor I get a preview of what will happen if I click the mouse button. And what it will do is it will remove that darkening that we've added, and probably the easiest way to show you, if I make the hardness 100%, you can see very easily that if I do one click, it's now completely removed the effects of that darkening. And over here on the actual layer itself, you've got a little thumbnail showing you that you've got a big black splodge in the middle. If I click somewhere else, it will recenter, and it says, right, okay, everything that white, the layer has been applied to the photo. Anywhere that's black, it has been taken away. Now obviously, if I wanted to brighten his face, I could do it this way, but you've got horrible chunky edges, which you just don't want. So basically I'll undo these 3 paint commands, and we're going to look at controlling the brush. So at the moment we're at a hardness of 100%, we're at a flow of 100% and opacity of 100%. They're the 3 main controls you have over your brush. So normally if you want nice soft edges, you reduce the hardness. So if I click on the little arrow, I can move this down, and if I, let's say 30%, if I look back, if you look at the brush now, you can see that it's completely removing it right, well not complete, yeah, completely removing it in the middle, but it's fading out to the edge. So if I just click on that, you can even see the faded edge on the little thumbnail. Now again, it's removing all of it in one go, and I don't really want to do that. I want to blend it in. So what we really want to do, probably reduce the hardness down to 0, and we've got 2 other controls. Flow is the easiest way I can describe this. If I make the hardness 100, make my brush a little bit smaller, so if I do a move down here, it's completely removed our filter. If I reduce the flow, now you can use the slider, or if you want, you can actually just type in a value. So 25%, hit carriage return, and what's in effect, it's doing a quarter of what the hardness is. So if I want to get the same effect, I would have to run over this area 4 times to completely match the 100% flow. So you can reduce the effect so that you can take several goes at improving or reducing the effect of any given filter. Let's go back, and the final one is opacity. So basically, again, I can reduce the opacity, and it has a similar effect to flow. If I increase the flow, you can see that that's not as hard. If I increase the, there we go, that's 100% of everything, and if I reduce the opacity by 50%, it does a similar thing to flow, but it's again, you're getting half the amount. So if I click on that area here and then click again, eventually you will get down to removing it completely. But you can see here on the thumbnail, and in fact if I hold the Alt key down and click on the thumbnail, it shows you what you've done. So black in the middle is 100% of the filter has been removed, and the grey, the lighter the grey, the less it's removed of the filter. Click on any other layer and that picture goes away. So again, let's remove all of those. So to get a subtle effect on this, what we want to do is reduce our hardness. Now I showed you, you can type a number, you can click on the arrow and move it up and down, but there's a more direct route. If you just move your cursor to the actual item, the name itself, and just click the left mouse and move to the left or move to the right, it will just adjust the value, and you can see it adjusting there. So hardness will reduce to 0. Flow I'll reduce to let's make it 50%, and opacity 50%. So if we come in here, you can see that it is going to reduce it. Let me just increase the brush, and what I'll do is I'll just start brushing over his face to reduce the effect on his face. I'm going to not do it to there because we've got a bit of a blowout there, so I can just come round and then just come onto the arms and hands and just run down and around and just basically lighten up those areas by removing the filter, the darkening filter, and we'll just run round until we're happy with the tone that we've got. I might want to do the ears, so I'd reduce my brush, zoom in and just come round and just reduce it on the ear, and then do the other one, and that's pretty good. So we've done some work there. What I might want to do is, he's got some shadows under his eyes, and I might want to reduce that a little bit further, and because it's blending it in, we can reduce some of that. Probably not completely, because he'll have still had those marks in the original photo. It's probably a little bit too much, so I've left him with panda eyes there. How do I put it back on? Well, what I do is I switch my brush to a white brush. So if I press the X button, you can see up here white is now selected, and I can come here and I can start painting the filter back on to the image itself. So I can quickly flip between adding and taking them away just by pressing the X key. Okay, so basically we've done two layers on here. The other thing you can do is you can turn them off. So there's a little button just on the end of each layer, and I can turn that off, and I can turn the other option off, which was fairly light in the end. So could I just go back and change the darken here? I could. I can come in and that will further darken it, or I can lighten it. I can make these little adjustments. Now if I want to turn everything off, if I click on one item and hold either the control key down to select more than one, or the shift key if I wanted to arrange, all the ones that are highlighted, so if I now press the toggle, it turns both on and off at the same time. So we've made some, just with 2 layers added, we've made some substantial changes to this photo. We've made it more moody, but we've brought him back up in lightness so that he's the centre of attention in the photo. Right, one thing I don't like about this photo is it's not that sharp, so let's sharpen it up a little bit. This is where we go to the other filter methods, and if I open that up, you get a long list which is going off the screen at the moment. So let's just widen this a little bit. Does that make a difference? No, probably not. But down here you've got clarity, unsharp mask and high pass, which are three methods of sharpening an image. We're not going to go into all of them. I'm just going to use the high pass for this particular example. It's the one I tend to prefer. So I'll click on high pass, and I'll just move this menu back a little bit. And you're thinking, what the hell has happened here? What you've got is it's covered it with a grey in its entirety of the image. We've now got the filter here called high pass, and what we do is we just move this slider to the right until we can start seeing parts of the image. And what it's going to do, it's going to sharpen those edges. So any sharpening, all it's really doing is finding contrasting edges and adding dark and light to those edges to make them more prominent. And that's way too much. What we want to do is you can use it to increase it so you can find the area you're interested in. And really, obviously the most interesting point of any face is the eyes. So let's just pull that back down until we can just make out the eyes, around the ears, etc. So you can just make it out. Now, obviously, that's no use to us. What we need to do in this case is use a blend mode, and you can see that directly below here. Now, what blend modes do, we won't go into, that's a subject of its own right, but what you do need to know is that by default the best one to pick is linear light. So just go down the list, pick linear light, immediately you see the image. And what we can do is we can test that. What has it done? So we come over to the right and we toggle it on and off, and you can see the effect on the image. So that's on, off, on, and it's made a significant amount of sharpening. Now I would normally start at 1 pixel, so let's try that. Let's just put in 1, hit enter, turn that on and off, and it's a little bit sharper, but I think we'll go for 3 and try that, and that's significantly sharper. But don't go too wild, because, well, you've probably seen me in competition where people start saying, well, that's really over sharpened, and you can tell if I wang that up, you can see it getting very crunchy, very horrible. Yeah, you really don't want to do that. So let's stick to 2.8. That will do fine. That's fine. Okay, so we sharpened this up. We've made it darker, but brought back some of the lightness in the areas of his face and arms by using a paintbrush on that layer and removing some of the effect. That's what we've basically done. In every case, this hasn't been applied to the original image. That's still sitting here unaffected. All of these layers can be turned off or on. Okay, so that's probably it for this week. What I'll do one final thing, which is saving the file. So if we come up to File, the obvious thing is Save and Save As. This is my original attempt. So basically it will give you the file type as AF Photo. So that's Affinity Photo's own file type, and I'll just rename that Test and hit OK. Oh, hit Save. and that's been saved. And you can see the file name here has changed to test. That's okay. This will remember all of this layer information, so that when you reopen it the next day and realise that you've over sharpened it and you've increased the saturation too much, and you need to dial it back, you can go in, edit those and make more adjustments. I would suggest you do that. Whenever you do an edit, the tendency is you try it, then you try it a little bit more, and you get more and more used to it as you're looking at it, and you tend to pump it up a little bit more, save it, but when you come back and look at it the next day, a couple of days later, you realise you've over-egged all your modifications and they all need dialing back a little bit, so that's worth doing. Now that will save the a photo thing, but you want to get a JPEG out of the system. And the way you do that is you do File, come down, and you've got Export. Click on Export, and it gives you a preview image. If we look here, you've got JPEG. Pull down list, you've got PNG, GIF, TIFF, PSD, i.e. Photoshop document. So you can actually save it as a Photoshop document and give it to somebody with Photoshop, which is interesting. And you can also load Photoshop documents. So if you're already a Photoshop user, you can take your document files and load them into Affinity Photo and continue working. It does try and maintain all the layers that have been created in Photoshop. I've seen videos on it. I've never really tried it myself because I don't use Photoshop. But those of you who are existing Photoshop users, this is a way of taking some of your old images and maybe reworking them if you wish to. But anyway, we'll stick to JPEG. This point here, you're given a file estimate. Let me just run that back up. Now, if you're thinking of a PDI, you're normally uploading, I think the recommended maximum size is 5 megabytes. It could well still be over that amount, and there's two ways of reducing that size. One is looking at the pixels. So rather than it being nearly 3000 by 4000 pixels, and you're going to be displaying it on the projector, I can't remember what size it does, but let's say it's 1024. So what we'll do is we'll take the longest side. If we make that 1024, as soon as I hit return, it'll adjust the other size of the equation, so it's both reduced and your file size will be significantly smaller. That's probably too small. I'd have to actually look at the it's probably more like at least double that, but it doesn't matter. When you project it, the projector will sort it out. It's all about getting that file size down. So let me just cancel that so that you go back to the original size. Let me just export again, so we'll back up again. The other way is adjusting the quality. I'd probably do the file size first, but you can just tweak the quality down. I wouldn't go too far, but even adjusting it from 100% to 95%, it's gone from 5 megabytes, just over, to 2 megabytes. So you could just say, okay, let's try 98. There we go, that's 3 megabytes. Let's try 99. And there we go, that's under, and it's lost 1% of quality, which I can guarantee you will not be able to see. What it's doing, because it's a compression codec that's being used, what you'll probably find at 1%, there'll be some areas in that photo where some of the blacks or very dark colours have been moved closer together so that it can reference it much easier and have areas which are just one colour black. So that's how the codec reduces the amount of information in the photo. So anyway, once you've done that, whichever way you want to do that, you might want to, the other reason you might want to reduce the size is if you're uploading something to a web. You generally don't want very big files on a web page because you're just going to slow the loading of that web page down. So again, that's another good reason to either reduce the pixel density or reduce the quality slightly to get a much smaller, much faster loading file. Okay, so once you're happy, hit export. It will give it the default name, the same name as the file itself, which is test at the moment, which is fine. I'll go for that. Just hit save. And there we go, we have a JPEG. Right, I think that will do for this week. What we'll do is we'll pick some more areas next week and just take it a little bit further. We'll use some different images. If you've got any images that you specifically want us to look at, you could upload it to the upload area of the Pin a Camera Club, but give it a decent name so it doesn't get mixed up with competition type stuff. So name it something like Affinity Example and put your name on it so we know who it's from. So Affinity Example from by Fred Blogs, or just dash Fred Blogs. So Lou doesn't think it's going to go into the next print competition, and that'll be fine. And just drop me an email, or drop the club an email, just to say that you've done it. That'll be fine. Otherwise, I'll probably just be using some of my own photos that I think can be used to show off certain areas of the product. If we go back, if I just pull up the actual image, so if I click image raw viewer, okay, so if I just move that over so that you can see it, this is the original image. It was very noisy. We've got rid of some of that and we've adjusted the lighting, mainly that's what we did, and added a little bit of sharpening, so it's an awful lot better. This photo will never be perfect to be honest, but it's much better than it was. But if I was, I wouldn't use this for competition or anything like that. It's just not sharp enough, not enough detail. But it's a good example. It's easier to show awful photo to mediocre average photo than it is to show a really good photo and try to make that better. So it's a good subject for the lesson. Right, thank you very much. See you next week. I'll put out an email with what we intend to cover. Hopefully you can use this as a memory jogger. I've given you the photo, it's in the email, so if you want to practice on that, please do. If you want to pick your own photos, fine. probably better, to be honest. But just try a couple of these layers. If you're feeling brave, just try going down the list. You know, there's plenty of things that you can try there. But next week we'll cover some of the more common ones. Exposure, curves is a common one, and we'll look at some of the other tools that we have down the side here for fixing up the image. Thank you very much.